Government's pathologist Dr. Nihal Singh on Wednesday morning conducted autopsies on the bodies of Isaiah and Joel Henry. The teenagers were brutally killed in a back dam at Cotton Tree, Berbice at the weekend. The autopsies were conducted at the Memorial Garden Funeral Home mortuary. Nihal Singh concluded that Joel Henry died as a result of hemorrhage and shock due to multiple injuries. Attorney at law for the bereaved families, Nigel Hughes, who witnessed the autopsies, spoke with reporters.
In the case of Joel, he had 18 wounds. What we suspect is the fatal wound was severed his spine from the back. He had several head injuries. He had about 7 or 8 what we would call wounds or chops to his head, and the pathologist suspected that after he got those wounds, he fell to the ground and was on the ground when that wound that severed his spine between the first and second vertebrae was inflicted. That's in the case of Joel Henry. He also, there's evidence that he bit his tongue. And Joel Henry has several defensive wounds in his hands. With chops, he's got several incised wounds that clearly came from a sharp instrument. So he had about 4 or 5 wounds in his hand, on both hands, so he had defensive wounds. Then the injuries to the head, fell on the ground, got a chop that severed his neck. And if I can just give you the particulars on that, it was pretty nasty. His own was 14 inches by 3 by 6 inches deep. So the wound that actually, the one that severed his spine, was 14 inches long, 3 inches wide. Well, it ended up being 3 inches wide and 6 inches deep.
The police also reported that Isaiah Henry died as a result of hemorrhage and shock due to multiple incised wounds.
In the case of Isaiah, he had no defensive wounds on his hands. He had a lot more wounds to his head, several chops to his head, very deep chops. And in his case, his vertebrae was severed between his spine was severed between the second and third vertebrae. And the measurements of his wounds were 14 inches by 4 and 6 inches in depth. So in both of their cases, both of these young men had their spines severed very, very high up between the second and third vertebrae. There were no defensive wounds on the hands of Isaiah, which would tend to suggest that what happened is that the amount of chops that he got to his head, he would have fallen on the ground, and while he was on the ground, that wound that severed his spine would have been inflicted.
Even as the bodies of the teen cousins were handed over to their families for burial, Attorney Hughes says that a more professional advice will be sought.
What we have done is we have taken both video footage and still footage, which we are going to be sharing with pathologists in Canada and internationally, and hope that as a result of the images that we share, that they may be able to either confirm or add their interpretation of what happened. The doctors suspected that they would have died somewhere between 36 hours prior to the time they were found.
The teens' relatives, who also witnessed the autopsy, say that the killing of Isaiah and Joel was savage.
Isaiah is that them savage, me brother. Understand? Them all walk me that very sad, and me cousin is right. Yeah. Them man. Well, with me brother now, the man both sit down from back. Yes, right? The man both sit down from back, and the man chop her a linear and them thing. And then with me cousin now, there's 3/4 of this man neck cut out body, just this, and then the man savagely like X up in the air and them thing, chop you up in the air and them thing. Yes, right?
As the police continue their investigation, they have confirmed that 7 persons remain in custody. Travis Chase, HGP Nightly News.